Welcome to Stampscaping 101. We're going to be working with our kind of lighting sensibilities in this video, and I'm going to show you how to develop your light. I'm called this video Finding the Light, but it's really the development of it, mostly through shading, okay? Now, I have a lot of questions or comments sometimes about, how people say oftentimes, okay, well, I got the technique of building up inks or whatever media we're going to be working in, colored pencil, whatever it might be, okay? But they say sometimes they still kind of, are a little bit uncertain about their lighting development. When we're doing scenes like this, you're kind of approaching it from the standpoint of being a lighting director, like in a stage production or something like that, where you have multiple lights that you can use and different backlighting, colored lights, etc. When you're doing these types of pieces, okay? Now, this video is going to be based on kind of developing your light without having an obvious source of light, like something like these two stamp sketches here, or I have an opening in the sky, so that would just kind of naturally be our source of light within that space. Or on something like this, where we use a sky figure. Often sky figures end up being our source of light, so it's obvious that that's going to be something that's illuminated. But what we'll also do is we'll show you where reflected light would come into play on various compositions. Okay, maybe I'll do these two on the next video or something like that as we work on our lighting kind of methodology and the development of it. Okay, so I have two different cardstocks here. One is a glossy and one is a matte. I thought I would do two scenes here and finish them off, but I'll do them in two different mediums. Okay, we'll work this one with dye-based inks, and we'll work this one with colored pencils. Okay, so you can see that the media doesn't matter in terms of the general concept of the development of lighting, okay? All right, so again, these are two scenes from the stamp sketching video recently on compositional builds and the, 3 or 4 step process in, creating that. Okay, so let's start with this one right here, a glossy cardstock piece, okay? Now, a lot of my videos are based on the glossy cardstock and dye-based ink application method, the building of it, the layers of ink type of process here. Okay, now there aren't multiple, or there isn't one way to light a scene. Okay, there's multiple ways to do it. Okay, and this one's no different than any other. Okay, now there's different types of lighting. Okay, there's front lighting and back lighting, okay? Oftentimes in my scenes, I do this thing that's backlit, okay? I often have, if I have an open sky like this in the background, I often have the lighting coming from there, okay? Now we're working on a white piece of paper, okay? So on a white piece of paper like this, we're not necessarily going to be adding a lighter area into the scene, okay? We're starting off with a white piece of paper, okay, white cardstock. So, in order to define light, we're doing it through the use of shadow, okay? So whatever we don't color on here is going to be light. That's one of the biggest, confusing parts for people when they see a finished piece. A lot of it might be dark, so they might think you started off with a dark piece of paper of whatever color scheme that you worked in. And then somehow you added a lighter medium back into it to represent the light in a scene. So that's the biggest question, that always happens. Or they think you started off with a completely, dark, paper. You stamped everything on it, and then you did some sort of bleaching technique to remove media off of it, thus revealing the white of paper. Okay. All right. So this is different than starting off with a darker paper like a foil where we're actually adding light back into it. It's kind of the opposite process, but the same sensibilities in terms of light source and reflected light, okay? So don't see it as like something real different. Kind of see the root, the base of everything, and that will help you in your kind of methodology and your thought process going into scenes, okay? All right, now I'm going to try to keep this fairly, oh, I don't know, minimal in terms of our process here by way of number of inks that we're going to use, okay? All right, so this is a bayou scene. I'm going to do something I think maybe sunsetty, I'm thinking, okay? So, now there's a whole other video on this, but I'm grabbing out some inks that can kind of be, you know, of a sunset or maybe twilight more than sunset type of color scheme here. Let's see, let's grab another, maybe an orangish tinge. Let me try, I'll show you something here that might be interesting to you. I'll throw a pink in here too. Pink, I've often, well, I haven't done it for a while. This type of color scheme right here, okay? But we'll use some distress inks in here. I don't, maybe I'll use a little bit of greenish tinge, I don't know. Okay, this is what I used to do in my classes. I would have people line up their pads going from light to dark. Okay, now the distress inks, you know, in here are going to go something like antique linen, and the walnut stain looks a little bit darker, but it's really not. It's kind of, you know, somewhere like this, believe it or not. It's way lighter than like this medium brown here from Marvy, okay? So mix and match your pads, mementos, you know, Stampin' Up, whatever you have. I would just kind of roughly lay them out from light to dark. And here's the thing. If you can't tell which color is lighter than the other, you know what I mean? Switching them out or whatever, it's not going to matter. You know what I mean? I can tell this is like lighter than this one though, you know. So I'm not going to have this one like that. But if you can't really tell, don't sweat it. It's not like it's going to be any big deal, you know, in terms of our application process. Okay, finding the light here. All right. So in one of my other videos, I have this video called Easy Lighting, okay? So if you look for it, you just go Stampscapes Easy Lighting, okay, and it'll come up in the search engine. But a lot of times what I have is an area of light up here somewhere, okay, in my sky area. It could just, if there's no sky and you're seeing, there's an area of light somewhere, okay? Meaning I'll leave some area lighter than the surrounding area, okay? And then what I do is I have another area down here of light. So it just goes kind of like this and like this. All right, now how is that, you know, how do you employ this type of lighting scheme? All right, let's get over to our color scheme here. You can call it our color scheme, but it's also our value scheme because we're going from light to dark, okay? Now, I don't know if I'm going to use all these pads here. We'll just start, you know, we'll just start here, and, you know, if one just isn't doing anything, then we'll just move on to the next one, okay? Now, this is what we're going to do, too, with our colored pencil when we do our next scene, okay? I'm going to show you how fast and easy this can be, okay? Then this is glossy cardstock again. Oh, now, when I did this stamp sketching video, I really inked up my black Marvy pad. Really, I don't know, over-inked it. So some of this might smear even though it's been sitting around for a couple days. If you're worried about that, then, I don't know. Instead of doing the streaking type of thing that I do, we'll just dab, okay? Because there's just less chance of kind of, you know, smearing if you kind of drag it along like that. Okay, now let's look for these two areas of light in the scene, okay? Or the development, okay? So I'm putting this antique linen, okay, it's really light. I like to start off with a really light value because it's not a huge commitment to value, darks and lights. You know, there are shadow colors or whatever, okay? Now, I'm going to do this fairly monochromatic. You know, when you go out there in like a sunset type of situation, you know, there's that golden light over everything. You know, water isn't usually blue or something like that, like high noon. It reflects the colors of the sky, so you get that type of coloring scheme happening in your water type of situation, okay? So here it is, right here, okay? Now this is really light. It's not some kind of huge commitment to that. If I go like this, it's no big deal, right? So that's what makes it so easy to do, because I use kind of, I wouldn't say foolproof methodology, but it's close to it. You know, when people always say, oh my gosh, you make it look so easy, don't use hard techniques, you know, or methodology. Don't rush things. Okay, I want to get to, you know, dark brown really fast, and if you go like this with the dark brown, you're going to see, you know, big dark brown splotches all over this. Okay, but that, I mean, we're not working like that. Don't, you know, just smudge everything. But it's just saying that if you do, it's no big deal. Nothing really happens, you know, with such a light color of ink, okay? All right, so here's this going on right here. I have an area of light right here, okay? It's just a little bit lighter. Now, if you didn't leave any of the white with your first color, don't worry about it. Just leave some of that lighter area, antique linen, with your mediums and darker tones. The biggest thing that people do in this type of process right here, that's a mistake, is, you know, they get really familiar with, you know, and comfortable with laying down some of this ink. And then they lose all their, you know, they color everything because a lot of people are coming from this process of complete area applications of ink. So on outline styles of designs, you stamp it and then you color within the lines. Okay, now there's a separation between this area and this area. That's a different color. Okay, so when they think of skies or water like that, they want to fill in the whole thing. Now that's not wrong. Okay, you can do that. You just won't have any lighting in there. What you're doing is you're coloring. Okay, on this one right here, you're coloring, but you're also lighting by not coloring everything, okay? So it's actually doing less work, okay? It's doing, you know, it's thinking kind of one step ahead a little bit more, but really your application is less, right? Because you're leaving some areas of light. Okay, now here's the thing. As I do this, I want that area of light to be kind of, I want it to graduate out of there. I don't want there just to be a hard, kind of spotlit area of light down there. If you're doing some kind of alien abduction scene or something like that with, you know, light coming from above, then fine, okay? But this area in here, I want it to kind of gradually get darker as I move out. So let me show you how you do that, okay? All right, so this is the walnut stain, okay? And see this right here? It's just a little bit darker than my antique linen, okay? So see, that's how you move through your kind of progressively darker colors, okay? Now watch this right here. See this as I come in like this? I'm just coming in like this. Now watch this right here. Here's your movement like this. It's like this, okay? It's not like this and then up, okay? That way I don't get this hard application of it. It's more like this, okay? So you can go like this. I mean, just keep a really light touch. Now here's what people do though, okay? If I'm talking about when they first start doing this, okay? They go like this with a really light touch, and you can barely see anything. Well, they're thinking, it should be this color of this ink. So they want to go hard, and then that's how they're talking about getting, you know, doing things with a heavy hand. It's because most of the times when we're using inks, we're expecting a full saturation of any given color. But what I'm doing here in this type of process right here, it's like 5% version, 10, 20, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. And that's if I kind of just stay there, okay? So don't kind of go like this, okay, on the entire side of something. What you're doing is you're just inking up like this, and you're staying in that area until you get that nice saturation going like that. Plus it's kind of varying, it's transitioning from more ink over here and less ink over here. Do you see how that's working? Because when I first ink this up, there's more ink on it, and I'm hitting that outside edge. And then, as I kind of swipe in like that, there's less like that, okay? So don't feel strange about it. You'll get the feel of it, like after one scene or something like that. But don't kind of rush it, or don't feel like you're doing something wrong if you go like that and you can't see anything. It's not about that. It's about doing it like 20 times or something, you know. Okay, now here's something to, I hit a little bit more ink in my shadow areas, like that. But this is just two colors of ink right now, right? And some of my things are kind of smearing a little bit, but I'm not worried about that because I'm going to go darker in that area anyway. Okay. Okay, but can you see the lighting in here now? I have kind of my source of light. It's, light coming from kind of the horizon area, and then it's reflecting down here in the water. But the reason why I have two areas of light like that as opposed to one is because I bisect it, okay? I kind of come across, so I go light, or dark, light, dark, light, dark. Okay? So you don't have to, lighting doesn't have to be kind of this mystery. Just have an area of light in the sky and an area of light down here. When you get into bigger scenes, maybe you have two areas of light, down on your reflected light area. Okay, now sometimes too, when I get into my scenes, I think it's too anemic in here. I need a little bit more ink. So you can come in here, especially with your first couple colors that you're using, and add a little bit more ink in here. Okay. All right, now let me show you where this the spirit of this piece starts to change a little bit. I'm going to go into this with a pretty warm tone, okay? That's really going to change the spirit of the piece in terms of the intensity and temperature of the piece. Okay, now, this is just an example, okay? This isn't what this video is about, but, when you're working through layers of tones like this, we'll do it with the colored pencils too. See how much lighter and brighter this piece is now? It's bumping up the intensity of the scene from something that was pretty dull, not dull in terms of interest, but dull in terms of intensity, relative brightness. Okay? So you notice that I'm warming up? Now I don't know if this yellow is probably lighter than, the walnut stain, but like I said, it doesn't really matter. Okay? Just don't go from something super light to something super dark. Unless those are the only colors you have, okay? And you just have to go, you can do these scenes with just all black ink and just kind of create a grayscale scene, okay? So something like this, but so you see, I'm retaining those areas of light right there, okay? I'm going to put some of this across my reflections of my windows in the cabin. The cabin windows are light. But if I color them out, I can always go into that area with a white pen at the end. Okay, see this right here? You can really bump up the intensity. I can get more of this built up like that down there. But can you see the lighting in here again? Light source and reflected light, because I've retained my areas of light like that, okay? All right, let's see. Let's go into pink here. Okay, now, when I change hues, that are a pretty big change, I'm going to change my applicator area, okay? It's just a paper towel. I just generally want kind of like a finger-sized area. Okay, this old pad's like 30 years old. There's still some ink on it. Let me go with the rose pink. Let me see if this one's better. Yeah, the rose pink. This pad's probably 30 years old. It's all indented and stuff. I didn't know if it was dry. And this one's, I don't know, this one's probably 15 years old or something like that. Maybe that's a little bit too intense. Okay, let's change the spirit of this again. Let's see if we can go with see, pink and yellow, mixed to form kind of an orangish tinge, right? It's a little bit more of a sunsetty look. Let's get a little bit more on that. The paper isn't kind of grabbing the ink off of my applicator so fast because the paper is starting to get kind of super saturated with ink on the surface. Now if I'm, in much warmer, drier weather, maybe it goes on fast. Maybe this is drying up faster. But this makes it really easy to apply. Now that being said, when I'm doing this, when you get into these, darker colors. As you apply your inks, if your surface is a little wet and the pulp of the paper is starting to get a little bit damp, um, the transfer of ink to paper isn't as fast because dye-based inks work by staining, okay? So if they're not staining because it's kind of filled up with, moisture already, you have to be careful because going like this to over here, there's a lot more ink by the time you get over here. When I was starting to work with that antique linen on a dry piece of paper, a couple of strokes, and all the ink was gone already, okay? So that's how people kind of lose their area in here too. It's with their darker colors because there's so much more ink on it. Even if they were started with the same amount of ink, it's just not transferring at the same rate. Okay, so here's the little thing on lighting too. Let's make the area around it a little bit darker, okay? Because again, I want to go for those kind of transitioning values, okay? I want to go from light, kind of medium, darker over here, okay? Yeah, that's the pink right there. Let's get a dark brown. I don't think I'm going to use the green. I don't think the green's going to look good in this. Okay, I'm just going to stay with the same paper towel here. When you go kind of lighter to darker, within the same general color family, you don't need to switch. If you're going from something dark to something light, then, switch out your area of your paper towel. Or whatever, sponge applicator, whatever applicators you're working with. Okay, now seeing the darker tones, I stay more perimeter oriented, okay? And I like to kind of define, shadows a little bit more. And there's a shadow on the cypress tree. So I just kind of reiterate what's already happening in my designs. I have a darker area underneath my kind of bayou house, okay? So I might add a little bit of that tone down there. This isn't the greatest area, applicator for details. So I'll show you what I do with, some other types of media, mainly alcohol inks, in the spirit of lighting, of course. Okay, so adding this in. Okay, can you see that brown? It just made it a little bit, kind of darker on the perimeter. But remember, if I'm going to go to dark brown and black, you have to go in, with your other colors so that you're leaving enough room for darker colors on the perimeter. So, so you can come into it a little bit more if you think, oh, I'm not going to have the space for two more colors, okay? Two more transitioning colors, I should say. All right, but can you see that lighting? You could stop at whatever time. There could have been lighting just after the antique linen. Okay, and we could stop there. This is just more dramatic lighting. The darker you go. Okay, now this is a dark brown. Now remember, it's not going to be so dark of a brown because a lot of it isn't transferring onto the paper at this point in time. If it was wet before, it's even wetter now. Because I've added another, 2 or 3 inks since that time when I was mentioning, the transfer rate, okay? All right, but see that right there? Well, it's a little bit different than this side right here. You can see, especially in the shadows, okay? Yeah. And see, this really blends in very nicely because I have all those other colors underneath it, and it's not a color that's much darker than the colors built up that I'm applying it on, okay? Now, like I said, I could do this all just with one black pad and create a grayscale lighting scheme in here, okay? But this, if you work through multiple tones of transparent types of inks, which dye-based inks are, it just becomes a much richer looking surface. It creates that glow, okay? Because this dark brown is over the top of a lot of other colors that are showing through it, okay? These aren't opaque colors, they're transparent, okay? So this brown applied here is going to look very much different than just straight brown applied on a white piece of paper. It's not going to have that glow, okay? Not that you can't do those types of things, okay? There's just different types of looks. So this is just kind of one way to do it, but look at that glow that we have here. I can't see that yellow in a yellow incarnation over here, but that yellow is affecting how this looks over here. It's kind of creating that nice, kind of deeper saturation and color glow. Okay, now I stamped out all of my imagery in black ink. I'm going to go with black on my perimeter. I call this tipping the edges, okay? And this kind of helps out with framing and composition. It tends to contain everything. If things are kind of looking really busy within a given composition, in terms of the number of stamps used and whatnot, kind of just framing like this just seems to mellow everything out. It increases lighting because the darker you take some area within your scene, by contrast, the lighter areas seem one step lighter, okay? So can you see the difference between this area right here and this side? Okay? Tipping the edges again. Just start it on a little corner like this. Let's see. Can you see that right there? See that right there? There's the black, okay? And that's all you want. And then what you do is you just kind of blend it in with the drier application of black, okay? So in other words, I don't go with black and just start going in here. I go in a little corner like that and tap it for a while. See, I'm not going tap, tap, tap. I'm going tapping, and then you kind of move it like that. Because by the time you do it a few times, it's getting drier and drier, and then you're using more of like a light gray, you know, to apply, okay? So it's tapping, getting a little bit down there, okay? And then you just kind of spread it out. You can think of it like, I don't know, let's see, like you're putting peanut butter there and then spreading it out. The worst analogy I've ever come up with in the history of this video channel. Okay, but anyways, look at that lighting in there now, okay? It's going light, a little bit darker, a little bit darker, 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 darkest, okay? Now, I mean, you can come in here too. I mean, there's lighting, or shading, I should say, opportunities within this space, okay? But what do you do to do that, okay? You start off with your lighter tones, okay? Now, glossy cardstock is a perfect opportunity for things like alcohol pens. And plus, if you've stamped all this out with water-based, dye-based pads, those are water-based, so alcohol pens, alcohol and water don't mix, right? So, see what I did right here? Kind of light, medium, darker. I don't know, these two are about the same values, so, you know, so like right in here, in my, that looks pretty dark. But in my water down here, say I can kind of come in here on the, you know, the cabin house, bayou house. I can put some tone on it like that. Let's go a little bit lighter for this top area, okay? Is this right here? The bayou house and the porch. Let's get a little color into it, okay? Like that. So if I put too much, I can take like a blender pen, or I can just go with my lighter one and just, well, it's still a little bit wet. I can remove a little bit of it. It's not removing a lot, but you can take off a little bit of it. See underneath my porch right here, I can kind of put a little bit of color down like this. This is a really light tone, okay? But if you want to get a little bit, you know, kind of more shaded, you can come into it like this. Here's a little bit of a darker tone, okay? See what I mean? I'm not just using a black pen like this. I'm just kind of taking it nice and easy. See these cypress knees? I couldn't color it with, you know, the paper towel. You know, these real detail, you know, smaller objects like this. So you can come into it with something like that. See, I'm kind of putting a little shading at the base of it. You can come underneath your cypress trees or in your cypress trees like this. Now this is very subtle, and I can barely see what I'm doing myself and I'm right in front of it. It's because it's so subtle, you know. It's not making a huge change, but that's about, that creates your control, okay? So these are just your plain alcohol pens with your brush markers. Okay, now this scene isn't necessarily done, but I'm done with the lighting portion of it, which is the coloring portion, right? And the coloring developed the light. So you have on here, dark up top, light, dark in here, right? Light, dark, all right? So in other words, I just created an area of light up here, and I have an area of reflected light down here, okay? Doesn't always have to be the same intensity. It doesn't have to be the whited paper up here and the whited paper down here. It could have been antique linen up here, antique linen down here. You can always make, here's my little thing. I generally wouldn't make my reflected light area down here lighter than some area of the sky or something like that. Now, like I said, maybe the lighting is off the scene, okay? It's way higher than the horizon right here. You can have this darker and then have one area of light down here. That's not a mistake or anything like that. There just wouldn't be kind of a dialogue going on within your pieces of light source and the reflected light. It creates this, lighting dialogue within this space. But like I said, I mean, this would look pretty cool too if you just go like this and this is darker like that. Those little lights in the house would stand out more. You know what I mean? So that, like I said, there's more ways to do lighting. It's really whatever you want. If you see this like a stage, and you had a character over here fishing or something like that, maybe you put a spotlight on him, meaning you have that area of light down there, and you want to spotlight this bird here. Maybe this area down here is lighter. So this area in here could be completely dark, and it's more like a stage with dramatic lighting of, multiple spotlights or something of that sort, okay? Okay, so let's go on to our next piece right here, and let's just reiterate what we've been doing. I'll go with light up here and light down here, okay? But then let's do this kind of more in a, what they call local color type of sensibility. We'll go with the blue sky, green grass, and brown cabin like that, okay? I'll have an area of light like this. But, okay, so there's 3 spaces right here, and I've mentioned this in my lighting videos before. Sky, cabin's kind of its own kind of entity, right? But then we have our area of grass down here. But I don't see the grasses. This is all one space to be colored evenly. That grass right here in the foreground, I see as being different than that grass back there, because that grass back there, who knows, it could be 100 yards away and in the shadow of these trees, okay? So, grab your media. So people are like, I don't want to mess up, I got my, my pencils all kind of arranged and whatnot. Yeah, I get it, but if you haven't done this before, I'd recommend doing it. It doesn't take long to resort your pencils back into your pencil, your pen compartments and whatnot. Some of you are saying in your head, hey, I'm not going to do it. Okay. But anyways, here's some browns right here. Light, medium, dark, like that. Okay. So this is for my cabin. This is for my grass. And let's go to the sky. Let's go with the blue sky. Okay. Now, I'm no expert on colored pencils by any means. In fact, I've had this set for years and years, and I don't even recall what I initially bought them for. I think I might have bought them in school or something like that. And I don't know, we probably used them like once or something like that in one class for one semester. Hence this 30-year-old set, but light, medium, darks, okay? All right. One of you out there are saying, what color is that one did you use, I have to use that exact color, Mix and match, play around with different, I don't know, whatever brands you like using, okay? And like I said, you can always use these types of processes here with other media, okay? Yeah, I knew someone back when that they didn't do any scenes with anything except watercolor pencils But they never used the water with them. They just liked it in terms of the feel of the whatever it is. I don't know. I don't think it's wax because they were watercolored pencils. They need to be able to dissolve with water. But okay, let's start here. Area of light up here. But on my cabin, I'm going to leave that rooftop a little bit lighter. Okay, so it's going to go from kind of darker up here, light. You know, the darken is with the trees, light roof, darker, you know, sides of the cabin. And you're saying, okay, what do you mean by that? Okay, if you get something the same color, okay, like this pad right here, you know, this pad, this pink right here is the same color pink as, you know, the top part, right? Or what? Yeah, the top part from the side part. But look at this. This is capturing the light up here, and this is just a darker version of pink, right? So when you're talking about, you know, vertical types of things like this, you know, here's this wood right here. Look how light it is. But see, when you leave an area that's lighter on one side, usually, you know, the top areas, and you darken in the side, you make them seem more three-dimensional. Now, if this was a drawing of this stamp right here, and if we just colored this, all this wood the same exact color, what you're doing is you're flattening out that space as opposed to making it look more dimensional, okay? So different values, but within the same hue in your different spaces right here, or different objects, okay? So I'll show you how easy this is, okay? In terms of the lighting concept, okay, this is, I'm just going on with, okay, now remember this is the more of a matte style of paper. This one's actually silk coated. So it has a little bit of coating on it, but not so much that it would kind of prevent the transfer of, you know, this this medium. You know, if you try to use colored pencils like on a glossy, it's harder. Okay, I'm going to make this a little bit streakier up here in the sky, kind of those, you know, I don't know, different variations within my sky. It can represent, I don't know, moisture in the air. I'm not going to make stratus clouds or something like that, but I like this look in my sky area, okay? So, just like that, but I am leaving some areas a little bit lighter, okay? So, I mean, it's very subtle right now because this is my lightest color that I'm working with so far, but can you see that like that? So it's a little bit dark, light, dark, you know, type of thing going on. I put some down here, but again, this is just my first color of blue. Now, I mean, you can go darker just by using more pressure. I'm going to recommend not doing that. If you're a colored pencilist, you know, some that just, you know, you have used colored pencils and, you know, this is, you know what you're doing with it more than I do. So, do whatever you do accordingly. You can put comments on how I should be using it. Okay, here's the thing too. Okay, now I'm going to make this meadow in here grass, okay? Green grass. But the thing is, if I just do this blue up here and green down here, there's kind of a disconnect, so I like to bring in, if there's a color, a universal color within the given areas that I'm working in, I'll bring some of this down here. So in other words, blue is a component of green, right? You add yellow to blue, and it mixes to form green. So I'll bring this down here. Now I'm not doing this, you know, to create blue grass, but it'll provide a little bit of a foundation for the green to be applied in here, but still relate to that area up there, okay? All right, so here's what I'm doing down here. I'm kind of reiterating what I did in the sky there. I have more space down here than up top, but I'm leaving, you know, I'm not just leaving a big area of light down here. I'm kind of bisecting it because it gets a little boring, you know, then they have like this big, huge area just like that. So, kind of coming across it like that. But do you see where the relationship is between this process right here and taking your area like this, you know, your ink, and swiping it in like that, okay? It's darker on the outside, like this, and then as I come in here, I just have less of it, so it's darker on the perimeter, like this, and lighter on the inside. So we create those transitions again, okay? All right, that's enough of that one. Let's go to aquamarine. Okay, now if you need to know, that was light blue. I can barely read it. Okay, so what did I say on this one? Aquamarine. Already forgot. Kind of a warmer blue. And I don't have like a pattern or anything with my pencils. I just grabbed them right now. All right. I don't know if I've used this combination my sky before at all. You know, like I said, I haven't used my colored pencils too much over the years. I've just been more of a dye-based ink type of person, but that's really changed over this last year. I've been experimenting like crazy. I do like this. I really like this glow that you can get from dye-based inks by layering it. It's kind of in the spirit of oil painting, of working thin to thick and building up a lot of layers of ink, kind of in what they used to do in oil painting, trompe-l'oeil, you know, to fool the eye, types of things. You know, you've seen those super realistic paintings. Okay, so there is some of that aquamarine. Let's bring a little bit of that down here too. Okay. Kind of more of your base coats get, you know, the most amount of coverage. So, you know, when you move up into these other ones, you don't need to worry about, you know, using them so much. Plus, the darker you go, the more perimeter oriented you are, okay? This is just to come to show you, you know, how fast this can be done, you know? Even when you're working in multiple layers and, you know, kind of in a slower, more, kind of more of a deliberate process. You know, it's not like we're doing, expressionistic types of applications of media, you know? Now, here's the thing, too. One of the things I like, after I start kind of building up, you know, some of these tones, I like the feel of the surface that has, I like the feel of going wax into wax. Plus, my application with that first color, with colored pencils, because I'm not real adept with, you know, using colored pencils, um, it looks a little bit rougher, you know, my applications. Again, I'm not a, you know, user of colored pencils, you know, historically, so. But I like this feel. It just goes on so smoothly like this after you get kind of a buildup of, you know, some of that wax on the surface. Okay, see where that's getting a little bit darker over here? It's not huge, you know, it's not a huge contrast between this perimeter and the center here, but yeah, it's creating a little bit more. And again, when it transitions out like that through darker and darker tones from a light area, it kind of looks like it's glowing in there, okay? All right, there's some blue down here. Let's add some shadows and whatnot. Maybe I'm putting too much blue down here, I don't know. Okay, this one's pretty dark, blue-violet. Do I want to go with blue-violet? Let's see, test it. It doesn't look too bad. I'm just applying very little, though. See, I'm just, you know, kind of going really lightly like that. Working in colored pencils, you know, when I'm working in dye-based inks, the whole thing kind of comes together at the same rate. But on this one, since I'm working sections, it's like I'm kind of developing, you know, the sky first, and then I'll do um, the meadow or the cabin. Now here's the thing too. I'm going to put a little of this blue in the cabin rooftop too, like that. Just something very subtle. Otherwise, it'll look, you know, kind of unrelated to the surrounding area. Lightest grain right here. I think this is the lightest one. Okay. Ooh, it's fairly bright though, so I'll need to mellow this out. It's really super warm. It's a much warmer green than I thought. But maybe it's just kind of so much warmer by contrast because I've added in just all of the blues and, you know, there was a little bit of a warm blue in the aquamarine, but for the most part it's kind of a dull blue. And again, because I didn't, use them in full saturation like that, I just kind of used a very light and dull version of it, okay? Not dull in terms of interest level, but dull in terms of intensity, brightness of it, okay? So this is really standing out. I think it looks terrible like this, but this is like the first color, so it's kind of your base layer, okay? And having this kind of lighter, warmer, brighter tone underneath the other greens that I'm going to use in here will give it kind of a better glow. All right, see that right there? Do you see this little area of light and the area of light right here? I kind of have it, that dough kind of backlit a little bit. Let's see this one right here. I think this one's roughly the same, color as the last one I used, so I don't think I'll need to use too much of this right here. Let's go to kind of a mellow green. Let's see. True green. Okay. This one's good. It's very muted. So it's kind of providing a nice kind of, I wouldn't say a neutral green, but just kind of a, more of like a filler green, okay? It's kind of working to blend all those other greens together just because it's so nondescript, okay? All right, so that is that. Dark green. Let me see this one right here. This one's olive green. Let me go with the olive green. It has a little bit more of an earthy tinge to it, okay? Okay, now one of the things I'd like to do is I'd like to add a little bit more of a shadow area at the base of my objects, like trees or the cabin. Okay. Now with the darker tones, sometimes I like to do that little bit of a vignette to make the the corners and sides a little bit darker. Okay. You can do colored pencils and dye bastings too. It doesn't have to be one or the other. You can put like your base layer colors down with, say, dye bastings. I mean, yeah, base layer with dye bastings as opposed to lighter colors of colored pencil too. So work your, multimedia, and the dye bastings should show through here too. I'm going to get a little bit of this green on my cabin too. It's going to be, kind of a brownish cabin, but I want to put a little bit of that green in there to create that relationship. I'm not seeing as much of the blue now because I've covered most of it up, but it is influencing kind of the overall color scheme in here. Now now see this olive green to me, as I look at this, now I feel that this piece is, the color scheme down here is starting to come together. It doesn't happen right away with those lighter colors because they're base layer colors, okay? So this is where it's starting to kind of read more as the color scheme down here than that I wanted, okay? But it's a richer version as a result of having built through all those different layers of different colors, okay? See that right here? See that lighting down here? Okay. It's light up here, but I mean, it's not a stark white light down here. It's just lighter, and it's just lighter because I've taken the area around here and made them darker. Okay. Now I'll make a much stronger lighting scheme with the use of this darker green here now. Okay. But again, I'm not going to use the darker green so profoundly like this. Okay. I mean, I might get up to kind of a darker version of it, but I'm not going to do it just right off the bat. I'm going to build, my tones kind of gradually. my values, my shadows. Okay, I like to kind of add a little bit of a shadow area underneath my, characters within the piece too. So here's a little around the dough. Remember the four corners type thing? Okay, so hit that area darker down there. All right. Darken in the perimeter around here. See, when you darken the perimeter too, what we're doing is we're kind of creating this containment of our composition, but doesn't it also, it kind of directs your eye to your, your main subject matter. So by being kind of your own lighting director, you're directing your viewer's eye, whatever the recipient of your card, or maybe you don't give it to anyone. So it's kind of directing your eye to what you want people to kind of focus on or to kind of land on as far as their visual landing point within the scene, Within the scene, there's a certain kind of a pathway that your viewer will look at, when you're looking at through. So when I look at this, I'm probably going straight to this dough here, then I'm kind of following up this way, and then to the sky like that. And that's the visual path. So by doing these types of lighting, your shading types of methodology, schemes, and so forth, you're kind of creating that pathway that your viewer will follow, and that's why a lot of times I like to kind of have things a little bit lighter here, just by making it darker on the bottom two corners, and it kind of leads the viewer in, okay? If this is all dark right here, it has a different kind of visual feel or emotional feel to it, okay? And again, it's not, there's nothing wrong about that. It's just different, okay? So like trees like this, here's another thing I do. I usually kind of frame an area up, but I leave a visual pathway to kind of walk in there. If I put trees all across this front, it's more of a feeling like we're kind of hiding back, through the bushes and, looking into the scene. Okay, here's the cabin. And I'm coloring in the kind of the side of it, like so, the horizontal edges. Okay, so kind of the more vertical ones, they're sloped or horizontal. We don't want them stark, light like that. And you can, cabins, you can have a black roof, for all if you want to, or something like that. Or a barn could have a red barn or something like that. But generally, what I'd like to do is I like to make the sides darker than the top, and then you have a more three-dimensional structure. And see this right here, I'd kind of put a little bit of a shadow underneath that, like that. So it says that that rooftop is kind of standing out. But, I mean, I don't just see that as, you can add more texture in here. There's kind of these tiles, shingles, whatever, on the roof. You can kind of darken in some in. Let's say these trees are casting a shadow over some of the roof. So you vary it, okay? As opposed to seeing that roof all as one kind of uniform lightness, okay? There's light and shadow hitting it too. Here's another version of brown. Looks like a little bit more red in it. Just to vary it and make it look a little bit richer in terms of the color scheme, the value scheme. All right, and then here's a darker brown. And I'm really hitting it in here. We'll vary some of the the colors of the rooftop boards. Like they're capturing some of that darkness. Okay, now here's the thing too. You know how I brought some of that green up into my cabin? Let's bring some of the cabin brown down into the grass, okay? I'll start off with the darker, or the lighter brown that I've used in here, okay? And I often like to use brown in my grasses. I just feel it kind of gives it more of a natural feel. It's even kind of creating a little bit of a glow. You know, there's some red in brown, right? So see that right there? A little bit of brown down there. So see, when you look at it from a distance, it kind of relates a little bit better. Okay, and let's see. Let me take some of this darker brown and put a couple little darker areas underneath some of those boards. Let's make the back of this cabin a little bit darker. A little bit more shadows at the base of some of those trees, but maybe in brown. Okay. All right, but this is your lighting right here, okay? What do we have going here? We have, let's take a look at these two side by side. You'll see how, it's basically the same strategy here, okay? So we have it coming from dark up top. There's a lighter area right in here, meaning we've just haven't gone over this area right here with the medium and darker tones, okay? If we go darker right here, well, okay, there's a darker area of trees in this one. This one right here, we have the whole house and surrounding trees down here. It's darker, so it's going light, dark, light, and dark again, okay? So again, if we don't have some cabin or something like that that has a rooftop, then maybe this whole area becomes darker in here and you have just light, dark, light, okay? And I do it kind of like this, imaginary kind of 8 in here. And then I take my designs into consideration, which ones are, have an area of light in it, like these windows or something of that sort. This one has a rooftop here. Let's make that one a little bit more profound in terms of the, the light, the lighter rooftop, being top lit, okay? Let's see, let's darken up a couple areas like that. I don't know. I can tweak this, more and more. I'm starting to reach a little bit of super saturation with the wax on this, satin paper. It's not completely matte. It's a coated paper still, but I still like using it in terms of the impression quality on a coated paper. But that's your area of, a couple simplistic kind of uses of light, okay? And again, let's take a look at it on the gold foil in terms of lighting strategies. A completely different kind of process of developing our light. In this one, we're adding light into it in the form of white inks on dark paper. On this one, we're adding shadows on white paper, retaining the lights like this. But again, here it is like this again. I mean, here's a moon, very distinct, but you're going from dark, light, okay, and the dark down here, and then light again, okay? So you have an area of light, but what separates that area of light up here from reflected light down here? An area of darkness in between those two areas, okay? So anyways, I hope this video came in handy for those that are kind of getting new into stamping and you're used to full areas of coloring, okay? Like I said, a lot of people that come from kind of sectional coloring and whatnot, which I love too. It's just, these aren't outline designs. You're kind of creating your own space within a space for the retention of light so that when you're coloring, you're also creating light and thus creating your lighting scheme, as opposed to just doing this all uniformly. Doesn't that look better, having kind of an area in there? And even if it didn't have the dough, you know, you take that dough out of it, it would still kind of create this area of light in here. And kind of from an emotional kind of spirit, we're drawn to kind of illuminated areas, light areas, you know. It's a dark, you know, gloomy day, and here comes this light coming, you know, out of the sky, and it's illuminating some area down here. That area in the light tends to seem inviting. And that's where you have this kind of this pull of the viewer into the scene from an emotional standpoint too. Okay, and plus it's scenery, so people can relate to scenery and whatnot, of being kind of transported into these pieces like that. All right. So, anyways, that being said, if you have any questions, drop me a note in the comment section, and I hope that comes in handy for those that are developing that eye for scenic lighting.